There is a specific kind of exhaustion that no one talks about openly, and if you have carried it, you know exactly what it feels like. It is not the tiredness that comes from working too hard or sleeping too little. It is something deeper, something that lives in the chest and does not leave when the weekend comes, or when the vacation finally arrives. It is the weight of years spent trying to be enough, trying to hold things together, that's trying to smile through moments that felt like they were slowly dissolving something essential inside you. You did what was expected. You kept moving. You showed up even when showing up felt like carrying a mountain on your back, while everyone around you seemed to walk freely, unburdened, untouched. And the strangest part of all this, the part that makes it so unbearable in its particular way, is that no one could really see it. You learned to carry it quietly, not because you are weak, but because somewhere along the way, you understood that the world does not have much patience for a pain it cannot categorize or fix in an afternoon. So, you kept it inside, and you kept going, and the years passed, and the weight became so familiar that you almost forgot there was a version of you that did not feel this way. But here you are, still searching, still asking questions, still looking for something that actually makes sense of what you have lived through. That matters more than you know. What if everything you were told about strength, about resilience, about pushing through the pain, was not wisdom at all, but a way to keep you from understanding the one truth that could actually set you free? What if the suffering you have been carrying was never a sign of your failure, but evidence of something far more significant, something that the greatest mind of the 19th century spent his entire life trying to explain? Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig, and from his earliest years, he was shaped by a quality of perception that most people spend their lives actively avoiding. He saw things as they were, not as he wished them to be. His mother was a celebrated novelist who found her son's intensity difficult to tolerate. His father died under circumstances that left the family in shadow, and Schopenhauer, rather than allowing these wounds to push him toward numbness or distraction, it did something that almost no one does. He turned toward the pain. He looked at it directly, steadily, with the patience of someone who had decided that the truth, however uncomfortable, was more valuable than any comfortable illusion. What he found in that sustained, unflinching observation became one of the most complete and devastating philosophies ever constructed. It also became, for those willing to enter it honestly, one of the most liberating. The foundation of his entire system rests on a concept he called the will. Not will in the ordinary sense, not willpower or determination, or the conscious effort you make when you decide to get out of bed in the morning. Schopenhauer meant something far more fundamental, far more unsettling. He meant the blind, unconscious, ceaseless drive that underlies all of existence, the force that moves through every living creature without asking permission, without having a reason, and without a destination or a purpose. The will, in his vision, is not going anywhere. It does not have a goal it is working toward. It is simply a striving that generates more striving, a hunger that produces more hunger, a tension that resolves only to become tension again in a new form. This is not poetry. This is the mechanism of lived experience described with a precision that becomes more recognizable the longer you sit with it. Think about the last time you wanted something deeply. Not a small thing, but something you genuinely believed would change how you felt about your life. Maybe it was a relationship, a career shift, a place you wanted to move to, a version of yourself you were working toward. And think about how it felt when you were in pursuit of that thing. There was a quality to that time, an orientation, a sense that the present discomfort was justified because the future held a resolution. And then, whether you got the thing or you did not, something happened that Schopenhauer would have recognized immediately. If you did not get it, the disappointment was sharp and familiar. But if you did get it, if the thing you wanted actually arrived, there was a brief moment of relief, and then, quietly and inevitably, the hunger began to reorganize itself around something new. The satisfaction never lasted. The arrival never felt quite like the anticipation promised it would. And you were left, again, reaching. This is not your personal failure. This is the structure of desire itself, and Schopenhauer mapped it with a clarity that removes the shame from the experience entirely. He described human life as oscillating between two poles with no stable resting point between them. On one side, suffering, the active grinding experience of wanting something you do not have, of feeling the gap between what is and what you need it to be. On the other side, boredom, the hollow, and restless dissatisfaction that arrives the moment the wanting is temporarily silenced. You have felt both. Everyone has. The person who is bored is not at peace. They are simply between cravings. And the discomfort of that interval is what drives them back into desire, back into striving, back into the cycle that produces more suffering. Schopenhauer was not describing this to depress you. He was describing it because he believed, and I think he was right, that seeing the mechanism clearly is the first step toward no longer being completely controlled by it. Before we go further, I want to pause here for a moment and ask you something directly, something I genuinely want you to consider. How long have you been carrying this particular weight? The one that brought you to a video with a title like this one, the one that made you click, the one that made something inside you recognize itself in these words. How many years have you spent in that silent interior space where the exhaustion lives and the performance continues, and no one around you quite understands what it costs you to keep going? If that question lands somewhere real in you, I want you to go to the comments right now and write this. I have been carrying this longer than anyone knows. You do not have to explain anything. You do not have to write your whole story. Just those words. Because every single person who reads them in the comments will feel less alone. And that is not a small thing. That is one of the most quietly powerful things a human being can do for another. Now, here is where Schopenhauer's philosophy takes a turn that surprises even people who think they know his work. Most people encounter his pessimism and stop there, concluding that he believed life was simply terrible and there was nothing to be done about it. But that is not the full picture. Not even close. Schopenhauer identified 3 specific pathways through which the will can be temporarily or even permanently quieted, 3 doors through which the human being can step out of the machinery of suffering and into something that resembles genuine peace. The first is aesthetic contemplation, the experience of art, music, and beauty. The second is ethical compassion, the recognition of shared suffering that dissolves the illusion of separation between self and other. The third, and the most radical, is the complete negation of the will to live, a voluntary withdrawal from desire so total that it approaches what the great traditions of the East called enlightenment. Each of these deserves to be understood in depth. When you stand before a piece of music that reaches inside you and reorganizes something, Schopenhauer would say, you are experiencing a temporary dissolution of the self. In that moment, the relentless commentary of the individual will is silenced. You are not wanting anything. You are not planning, defending, pursuing, or avoiding. You are simply present in an experience that is larger than the personal. He believed music was the most direct expression of the will itself, not representing it from the outside, but speaking from inside it, which is why music can reach places that language cannot. The years of silent pain you have carried contain a frequency that certain music seems to understand. That recognition is not accidental. It is the will, in its artistic form, recognizing itself. The second pathway, compassion, is where Schopenhauer's philosophy becomes an ethics. He argued that morality cannot be built on reason alone, because reason can be used to justify almost anything. Real morality, the kind that actually changes behavior and connects human beings to one another, comes from a direct, felt recognition that the suffering in front of you is the same suffering that lives inside you. It's when you see someone in pain and something in you responds before your mind has time to analyze the situation, that is not sentimentality. That is the deepest form of perception available to a human being. It is the moment when the illusion of separateness collapses and you understand in your body, not just your mind, that the boundary between your suffering and theirs is a construction. Schopenhauer called this the foundation of all genuine ethics. And he was more right about this than almost any philosopher before or since. The years of silent pain you have been living through were not wasted. This is perhaps the most important thing I can tell you, and I want you to hear it fully. Every year you spent carrying something heavy and invisible. Every moment you felt misunderstood or isolated or quietly desperate. Every time you smiled through something that was actually breaking a small part of you. All of it was developing something in you that cannot be developed any other way. Schopenhauer believed that suffering, when it is not numbed or denied or escaped into distraction, has a purifying function. It strips away the superficial. It removes the pretensions. It makes it impossible to be satisfied with shallow answers. and the person who emerges from years of that kind of interior work is not broken. They are precise. They see more clearly. They are moved by things that others walk past without noticing. They understand, in a way that no book or lecture can teach, that life is both difficult and luminous, and that the two are not actually in contradiction. The strongest phase of your life is not the one where everything finally goes smoothly and the suffering stops. That is not coming, and Schopenhauer would want you to know that clearly and without cruelty. The strongest phase is the one where you stop waiting for the pain to end before you begin living with full presence, where you understand the mechanism of desire well enough to no longer be completely at its mercy, where you can feel the pull of the will without being dragged by it, where your suffering has been transformed by sustained and honest attention into the kind of wisdom that other people can feel when they spend time near you. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the rarest thing. If what you heard today reached something real in you, if even one sentence landed in a place that has been waiting to be recognized, please take a moment and leave a like on this video. Not as a formality, but because this kind of content only reaches the people who need it when the people who already found it decide to say so. Every like tells the world that this matters, and somewhere out there, someone is in a version of that silence you know well. And they need to find this too. And if you are someone who has been searching for a long time, for a perspective that actually honors the weight of what you carry, for a voice that does not try to rush you past the pain into a false positivity, for something that takes your interior life seriously and offers real philosophical depth instead of empty comfort, then this channel was made for you. Subscribe, not because I am asking you to, but because every week something new arrives here. Something built for the person who thinks deeply, feels deeply, and refuses to settle for answers that do not hold up under honest examination. You belong here, and the next video is already waiting for you.